All right, ready to boost that financial know-how?
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. I'm excited to dig into all this info you sent. And luckily, I've got our expert here to help us sift through it all.
Should be fun.
Definitely. We'll be tackling some financial lingo, those budgeting strategies everyone's always talking about, and even how different cultures view money.
You know, it's funny. A lot of times the biggest changes come from shifting how we think about money, not just learning some complex formula.
Okay, I like that. So before we get lost in spreadsheets and stuff, I found this bit from Smart Money Talk with Marco and Erica. They're big on knowing basic financial terms.
Makes sense.
I guess so, but isn't that kind of obvious?
Maybe, but think about it. If you're not even comfortable saying words like budget, expenses, investment,
Right.
how can you even start a real conversation about money, let alone actually make smart decisions?
Good point. It's like trying to bake without knowing flour from sugar.
Exactly. And Marco and Erica really stress that mastering those terms can flip things. Instead of feeling intimidated by money, you feel empowered.
Huh. Like it unlocks a whole new world.
It's kind of like learning a new language, one that opens up tons of possibilities.
So just using the right words can actually change our relationship with money.
That's the idea. Like they talk about how understanding the difference between saving and investing completely changes how you approach your goals. Savings, putting money aside for a rainy day, but investing is more like planting a seed that can grow,
Ooh, I like that analogy.
right? Both important, but they do different things.
So it's not just definitions, it's the nuances of the words, right?
Absolutely. Even something as basic as gross income versus net income, Marco and Erica say that makes a huge difference when you're actually making a budget.
Okay, vocab is key. Got it. But what about all those popular budgeting methods? You've heard of the 50-30-20 rule, right?
Sure.
I gotta admit, budgeting always makes me think of restrictions, like I can't do anything fun.
I hear ya. But what if we thought of it as a way to get what you want? Aligning your spending with your values, your goals. That's what the 50-30-20 rule is all about.
Yeah.
It's basically splitting your take-home pay into three chunks. 50% needs, 30% wants, 20% savings and debt.
Hold on. 30% for once. Doesn't sound too bad.
Right. It's not about denying yourself. It's about choosing consciously. Instead of spending without thinking, you're deciding where your money goes, making sure it supports you now and in the future.
So more of a spending plan than a strict budget.
Exactly. And the cool thing is, this framework can be adjusted based on your background, your values. If your culture is big on generosity, maybe you tweak those percentages, give a bit more to charity, help out family.
That makes a lot of sense. It's not one size fits all. We can tailor it, right?
Hmm.
But is this the only framework? What if your financial situation is unique or your goals are different?
Oh, there are tons of budgeting methods out there.
Mhm.
Some people like the envelope system, where you actually put cash into separate envelopes for different things. Others use apps that track your spending and make it easy to see where your money's going.
So it's about finding a system that fits you. Speaking of real-life approaches, let's check out Sarah and John from Smart Money Talk. They had a great conversation about their personal budgeting wins and struggles.
Love hearing how real people are doing it. What were some of their takeaways?
Well, they start with something we can all relate to, those surprise expenses that pop up. John had a pretty clever strategy, even if it sounds kind of scary at first, the emergency fund.
Ah, yes, the emergency fund. It's crucial. It's like a safety net, you know?
Exactly. But John explains it in a way that makes it feel doable. He says start small, even $50, $100 a month, then build it up to cover maybe 6 months of living expenses.
What's really interesting is that this connects back to the cultural thing we were talking about. In some cultures, saving for the unexpected is super normal, while others are more focused on enjoying the present moment. Understanding those differences can help us make our budgeting strategies more personalized, right?
Wow, I hadn't thought of it that way. So it's not just about numbers, it's about psychology and culture too.
It all plays a part. Money management goes way beyond just crunching numbers. It's about understanding yourself, your values, and all the things that shape how you act with money.
This is already blowing my mind.
Mm.
Okay, so we've got vocab, budgeting, frameworks, even a bit of culture in there. Before we hear more from Sarah and John, can we talk about those common money sayings? You know, things like break the bank, make ends meet, money doesn't grow on trees.
Those are so interesting. It's like they're little cultural lessons about money. We use them without even realizing the deeper meaning sometimes.
Totally. Like when I was younger, I'd say, money doesn't grow on trees, but did I really get what it meant about scarcity and hard work?
Right. That's why it's good to break them down. Take making ends meet. It's not just about getting by. It's that balancing act between income and expenses. And that's something everyone deals with, no matter their background.
It's a reminder that we're all in this together, right?
And breaking the bank isn't just about one big purchase. It's about the potential consequences of not being careful with your money.
Okay, I see how even these simple phrases can make us think deeper about our relationship with money.
Like little nuggets of wisdom passed down over time. And by understanding them, we get a better sense of what money really means in our lives and the choices we make.
This is great stuff. We've covered so much already, from vocabulary to budgeting to those cultural influences even.
We have, and we've even found some hidden wisdom in everyday sayings about money.
I love it.
And this is just the beginning. In the next part of our deep dive, we'll get into Sarah and John's budgeting strategies, pulling out some practical tips you can use in your own life.
Can't wait. This is getting good. Back again for more money mastery. Last time we were talking about financial literacy and how our culture plays a role in our relationship with money.
It's so true.
Yeah. So now let's get into some practical stuff. Remember Sarah and John from Smart Money Talk?
Oh, yeah, they were great. It felt like they were just regular people, you know?
Exactly. And this time, they're tackling something we all deal with, those surprise expenses. Like when your car decides to break down or you get a medical bill you weren't expecting.
Ugh, those are the worst. Sarah was saying how she used to totally freak out when those things happened. She'd either use up her savings or put it on her credit card, which just made things more stressful later.
Oh, I've been there. So what did she do? Does John have some secret trick?
Well, not exactly a secret, but he swears by the emergency fund.
Right, the emergency fund. I always thought that was for super organized people.
I know what you mean. It can seem daunting. But John says you don't need to start with a ton of money. Even if you put away a little each month, it adds up.
So it's more about consistency than a big lump sum up front.
Exactly. He says aim for 3-6 months of living expenses eventually, but even $50 or $100 a month is a good start.
Okay, that makes it feel less impossible. But even if you have that safety net, managing your everyday spending can still be tough. Did they talk about ways to stay on track with your budget?
They did. Sarah's got this system where she automates her savings. She sets up automatic transfers from her checking to savings each month.
Oh, smart. Like you're paying yourself before you can even spend it.
Yep. And she said it's made a huge difference in how much she saves. She doesn't even miss the money, and her savings just grow without her having to think about it too much.
I like that. No willpower needed.
Speaking of being proactive, did they talk about any ways to keep track of spending? That always feels like the boring part of budgeting.
I know. But Sarah actually makes it sound fun. She uses this budgeting app that links to her bank accounts, so it automatically sorts her transactions into categories.
So much better than writing it all down yourself. Right. And she said just seeing it all laid out like that really opened her eyes. It helped her figure out where her money was going and where she could cut back.
Yeah, those little purchases can sneak up on you, like that daily coffee or those subscriptions you forget you even have.
Totally. John called it trimming the fat. He saved a ton of money just by cutting out those unnecessary expenses without feeling like he's missing out.
Love it. It's like finding hidden cash in your budget. But what about those expenses that are harder to cut, like rent or utilities? Did Sarah and John talk about negotiating those?
They did. And John had a really interesting take on it. He said instead of thinking of those costs as fixed, he sees them as chances to save money. Like he'll call his internet and phone providers to try to get a better deal.
Wait, you can negotiate those bills. I thought they were just set prices.
Lots of people think that. But John says it never hurts to ask. He often gets discounts or special offers just by calling and saying he's looking for something better.
Wow, I never knew that. It's like we have more power than we realize when it comes to our money.
Exactly. It's about taking charge and knowing your options. And that goes back to the whole financial literacy thing. The more you know, the more you can control your financial well-being.
I'm feeling like a money expert already. So we've talked about emergency funds, automating savings, tracking what we spend, even negotiating bills. What other great tips did Sarah and John share?
Well, they touched on something that can be a little awkward, but it's so important. Talking about money with your partner or family.
Oh, yeah, that can get tricky. Some couples avoid it at all costs.
It's understandable. It can be emotional. But Sarah and John actually made it sound, dare I say, fun.
Really? Now I'm curious, how did they make money talk enjoyable?
They said open communication and shared goals are super important. So instead of having these big, stressful arguments about money, they schedule regular money dates to check in with each other, review their budget, make adjustments if needed.
Money dates. I love that. Makes it feel more like teamwork than a fight.
Totally. And they said to make it a fun thing, like going out for coffee or having a picnic.
So it's about creating a positive vibe for those conversations. Did they have any specific tips on how to approach those talks, especially if you and your partner have different spending habits or priorities?
They did. They emphasized listening to each other and trying to understand where the other person is coming from. It's not about one person being in charge. It's about working together to find a compromise.
It's just like any other relationship, right? Communication, compromise, empathy, all that good stuff.
Exactly. And Sarah and John even said they celebrate their financial wins together, no matter how small. Whether it's reaching a savings goal or successfully getting a lower bill, they acknowledge it and support each other.
A financial high five. Celebrating definitely helps you stay motivated and makes it all feel more positive. Wow, we covered so much in this part of our deep dive. Emergency funds, automating savings, tracking spending, negotiating bills, and even those money dates. I feel way more prepared to handle the practical side of money now.
Me too. And remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about making progress and figuring out what works for you.
True. And speaking of figuring things out, in our last segment, we'll be zooming out and looking at the bigger picture of financial well-being. We'll come back to those cultural influences and connect them to all the practical stuff we've learned.
Can't wait. It's all about bridging the gap between our internal world, our values and beliefs and background, and the external world of managing our money.
Sounds fascinating. Stick with us for part 3, where we'll wrap up this whole deep dive with some inspiring ideas and takeaways you can actually use.
And we're back for the final part of our deep dive. We've covered so much, from practical tips to, negotiating those pesky bills. But now I want to shift gears a bit.
Sounds good.
Let's talk about the bigger picture, values, goals, all that, and how our culture plays into all this money stuff.
Yeah, it's amazing how our upbringing shapes those views, often without us even realizing it.
Totally. Remember we were talking about some cultures being all about saving, while others are more like spend and enjoy life, or how in some cultures talking about money is just not done.
It can be so different. It really can. I've been thinking about my own background and how it's affected my relationship with money. It's pretty interesting. But how do we connect those cultural influences with the actual budgeting stuff we learn?
Well, first you got to be aware of it.
Okay.
Think about how you were raised. Were you taught to save every penny? Or was spending seen as a way to, live a good life? Do you feel comfortable talking about money? Or is it kind of a taboo subject? Figuring out those influences helps you understand your own habits and make choices that feel right for you.
So it's like a self-check, becoming aware of those deep-seated beliefs and habits.
Exactly.
Okay, but then how do we actually bring those values into our financial plan? That's the tricky part, right?
That's where it gets interesting. Let's say generosity is a core value for you, something that's really important in your culture. Think back to that 50-30-20 rule. Maybe instead of strictly sticking to 20% for savings, you put aside 15% and use that extra bit for charity or helping out family.
So you're not throwing out the tools, just adjusting them to fit what matters most.
Right. Or what if you're from a culture where talking about money is seen as rude?
Right.
It doesn't mean you can't talk to your partner about finances, but maybe you do it differently.
How so?
Instead of focusing on numbers, you could talk about shared dreams, a vacation you want to take, that feeling of financial security.
Oh, that makes it less about the money itself and more about what it enables.
Exactly. It's about finding a way that feels respectful of your background.
I'm loving this. It's like we're each creating our own unique money philosophy. But what happens when those cultural influences clash with our practical goals? Like, what if I was raised to save every dime, but I have this big dream that involves, spending and taking risks?
Now that's where the real challenge is and the real growth. It's about finding that balance. You could honor that saving mindset by creating a special fund just for your dream. That way, you're being responsible while still pursuing what you want. It proves that you can honor your values and still reach your goals.
Makes sense.
Right.
Like a back and forth negotiating between different parts of yourself.
Exactly. And remember, it's not about being perfect.
Right.
You're going to overspend sometimes, have doubts, maybe even feel a little guilty if you stray from those ingrained habits.
It happens.
But it's about moving forward, not being flawless. It's all about learning and growing as you figure this whole money thing out.
And as we've been saying, financial literacy is so key for that growth. It's about having the knowledge and the tools to make smart choices, choices that align with our values, goals, and, our cultural background.
It's about being in control of your finances, building a life that's both free and fulfilling, a life that you create.
I'm so glad we did this deep dive. We've talked about everything from basic terms to complex cultural stuff, and honestly, I feel like I have a whole new perspective on what it means to master my money.
Me too. And I hope you, our listeners, feel the same. Remember, mastering your money goes beyond just the numbers. It's about making your finances work with your values, goals, and that unique cultural identity you bring to the table. It's about creating that life of financial freedom on your own terms.
So well said. Well, it looks like it's time to wrap up this deep dive.
It does.
But the journey doesn't end here, right?
Oh, no.
Now it's your turn to take all this and apply it to your own life.
That's right. So go out there, figure out your own money mindset, try different tools and techniques, and never forget the best investment you can make is in yourself.
Couldn't agree more. And until next time, keep diving deep and keep mastering your money.